Everyone says honesty is the best policy. It's one of those phrases people repeat without thinking. It sounds clean, safe, responsible. And if you question it, you look like the problem. Because who argues against honesty, right? But here's the part nobody warns you about. Honesty isn't rewarded equally in every room. In some rooms, honesty gets you trusted. In others, it gets you studied. And if you've ever walked away from a conversation thinking, "Why did I say that?" or "I didn't need to share that much," you've already felt the cost. You didn't say anything wrong. You just said it too freely. That's the mistake most people make. They confuse honesty with safety. They think being open makes them relatable. They think transparency makes them likable. They think the more they explain themselves, the clearer they become. But what actually happens is quieter. The more you explain, the more you give people something to use. Not because they're evil, but because humans naturally map weaknesses. We notice patterns. We remember leverage. And the moment you become the most honest person in the room, you don't become the most trusted. You become the most readable. And readable people are easy to manage, easy to predict, easy to dismiss. That's why the most powerful shift isn't lying more. It's talking less. Because once you see how honesty really works socially, you realize it was never a rule. It was always a tool. And if you use it automatically, someone else decides how it gets used. We're taught this idea early. So early that we never question it. Be honest. Be open. Say what you mean. Tell the truth. Even when it's uncomfortable. Teachers reward it. Parents praise it. Movies frame it as courage. And by the time you're grown, honesty doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a moral obligation. But nobody tells you the part that actually matters. Those lessons were taught in environments designed to be fair. Classrooms, families, stories with clear heroes and villains. Real life isn't built like that. Adult social spaces aren't neutral. They're competitive, even when they look friendly. They run on incentives, not ideals. And in those spaces, honesty stops being a virtue and starts being information. Here's where the myth really breaks. We're told honesty builds trust, that openness creates connection, that transparency makes people respect you. But trust and respect aren't the same thing. Trust is emotional. Respect is structural. People might trust you with their feelings then while still seeing you as lower status. They might appreciate your openness while quietly deciding you're not a threat. And the more you explain yourself, the more you signal that you need to be understood. Needing to be understood doesn't create authority. It creates imbalance. Because in most rooms, the person with the most authority doesn't explain. They decide. They don't justify their thoughts in real time. They don't narrate their doubts. They don't rush to clarify every misunderstanding. They let silence do some of the work. But we're trained to do the opposite. If there's a pause, we fill it. If there's tension, we soften it with honesty. If someone questions us, we over-explain. Not because it's smart, because we were taught that withholding is wrong, that restraint equals dishonesty, that privacy equals deception. So we give access before it's earned, and that's the social myth. The lie isn't that honesty is bad. The lie is that honesty is always safe. In reality, honesty without context is exposure. Honesty without leverage is submission, and honesty without timing quietly shifts power away from you. And once you understand that, you stop asking, "Am I being real enough?" You start asking, "Does this room deserve the truth I'm about to give it?" So what actually happens when you overshare? Because most people think oversharing is just being open or being real. It's not. Not even close. The moment you start giving everything away, something subtle begins to happen. People start taking notes, not literally, but mentally. They catalog patterns. They map weak spots. They remember details they can use later, sometimes consciously, sometimes without even realizing it. Every doubt you voice, every insecurity you reveal, every little hesitation you admit, none of it disappears once it's out there. It lingers. You might think, I'm just being honest. I'm connecting with them. But connection doesn't always look the way you expect. Instead of admiration, people start predicting you. They start anticipating your reactions. They start understanding how you tick, more than you probably intended. Here's the kicker. Predictability kills leverage. Because the moment someone can read you like a book, you lose the upper hand. Even if they never act on it, the option is always there. Your transparency becomes a tool in their hands, even if they're not actively using it. And let's be real, humans are naturally opportunistic. We notice openings, even tiny ones, those little cracks you casually exposed. They aren't harmless. They're reference points, they're signals, they're markers that quietly shift power dynamics. Without you realizing it, think about it. The most honest person in the room doesn't get remembered for their bravery. They get remembered for being readable. Readable doesn't equal respected. Readable doesn't equal powerful. Readable just equals predictable. And once you're predictable, you're manageable, easily dismissed, easily manipulated. Even the people who like you, trust you, or admire you, they know exactly how far to push. So here's the bitter truth. Honesty can backfire. Oversharing is a social trap disguised as virtue. It feels noble in the moment, but it slowly chips away at your influence, your authority, your presence. The solution isn't to lie, it's to be selective. It's to decide what's yours to give and what stays locked behind the door. Because the less they know, the more they respect the parts of you they do see. Now let's talk about honesty versus leverage, because this is where most people completely miss the point. Honesty is simple. You say what you think. You reveal what you feel. You put your cards on the table. It feels noble. It feels right. It feels safe. But here's the problem. Honesty is neutral. It doesn't automatically give you any power. In fact, too much of it can strip power away. Leverage, on the other hand, is subtle. It's quiet. It's invisible until you need it. Leverage isn't about lying. It's about controlling what information leaves your hands and when. It's about timing, context, and placement. It's about being understood on your terms, not on everyone else's terms. Think about the most influential people you know. They don't always share everything. They don't feel the need to explain their thoughts in real time. They don't rush to clarify every misunderstanding. They speak selectively, and they let others fill in the gaps. That selective approach is leverage. That selective approach makes them magnetic, credible, and yes, untouchable. Here's the dangerous truth. The more honest you are, the less leverage you have. Every confession, every unfiltered opinion, every little self-revelation, it's ammunition. Even if the room doesn't feel competitive, even if everyone seems nice, that information quietly shifts the balance. Someone, somewhere, is keeping track. And the thing about leverage, you don't notice it until it's gone. You don't realize you've lost authority until someone else quietly starts to dominate the conversation, push the agenda, or shape outcomes, and you're left exposed. The difference is simple. Honesty is a gift given freely. Leverage is a weapon held intentionally. The first makes you readable. The second makes you untouchable. The people who get the most respect, the most influence, the most authority, aren't the ones being the most honest. They're the ones being strategically measured. They decide what leaves their mouth. They decide what to reveal and what to withhold. And because of that, they control the room without raising a single eyebrow. So next time you feel the urge to lay it all out, ask yourself this: am I trying to be honest, or am I trying to have leverage? Because once you understand the difference, everything changes. And if you get this wrong, you're not just being too honest, you're handing your power away. Now let's dive into something most people never notice. Restraint commands more respect than raw truth ever will. Think about it. When someone tells you everything, every thought, every feeling, every doubt, they don't feel powerful. They feel exposed. They feel readable. Humans aren't wired to respect freely available information. We respect what's measured, what's scarce, what feels earned. Scarcity isn't just for products or trends. It applies to people, too. The less someone reveals, the more we fill in the blanks ourselves, and our brains love filling in the blanks. It makes the person mysterious. It makes them magnetic. It makes them respected. Now compare that to someone who overshares. They pour themselves out in every conversation, reveal every detail, confess every insecurity. On the surface, it seems like honesty is building trust. But what it's really building is familiarity. And familiarity without boundaries rarely equals respect. It often equals underestimation. Here's the secret. People project authority onto those who control what they see. You ever notice that someone who speaks less in a meeting or holds back a little in conversation somehow weighs more in your mind? That's not magic. That's restraint. That's measured information. That's leverage in disguise. Restraint also forces people to work for the truth. When they have to earn access, they value what they get. When everything is handed over freely, it's taken for granted. And human nature is predictable. We respect effort. We respect the hard to get. We respect the controlled. That's why the quiet person in the room, the one who doesn't overshare, who chooses words carefully, who reveals selectively, ends up holding the invisible crown. You may not see it at first. You might even think they're boring or detached. But their scarcity creates weight, and that weight quietly shifts the dynamics of the entire room. So next time you feel the urge to say it all, to be real, pause. Ask yourself, am I creating clarity, or am I just handing away my presence? Because when you realize that restraint is more valuable than raw truth, you start controlling the room without saying a single word more than you need. And the crazy part? People think it's effortless. They don't see the strategy. They just feel the impact. Now let's talk about a trap most people fall into without realizing it. The trap of being real. We live in a world obsessed with authenticity. Social media tells us to be ourselves, to share your truth, to never hold back. It sounds empowering. It feels liberating. And for a moment, it is. But here's the hidden danger. Being real without strategy is just reckless. When you overshare in the name of authenticity, you're not connecting, you're exposing, you're not impressing, you're giving away parts of yourself for free. You're not leading, you're letting others map you, predict you, and sometimes use you. Being real doesn't automatically earn respect. In fact, in the wrong environment, it can make you a target. People notice weakness, doubt, inconsistency, whether you call it honesty or authenticity or self-expression. And those observations don't vanish once they're made. They linger, quietly shaping how people treat you, how they perceive you, and how much influence you actually have. Here's the part nobody tells you. You can be real without being naive. You can show personality without giving away the blueprint of how you operate. You can be honest without being vulnerable in the wrong way. That's the difference between real and reckless. The key is timing, context, and selectivity. Not everything you think needs to leave your mouth immediately. Not every feeling needs to be broadcast. Not every failure needs a confession. You get to choose what people see and when. Being strategic about your realness doesn't make you fake. It makes you deliberate. It makes you magnetic. It makes people pay attention because they don't have every piece of you at their disposal. They have to engage, to earn, to wonder. So the next time you feel the urge to spill every thought in the name of being real, pause. Ask yourself, am I revealing because it helps me? Or because I feel pressured to prove something? Because once you start using authenticity as a tool instead of a rule, everything changes. You stop being someone who is read instantly. You start being someone who is respected, considered, and remembered. And remember this, restraint is not deception, it's strategy. Now let's talk about strategic honesty, because this is where the game changes. Here's the thing, I'm not saying lie. I'm not saying be fake. I'm saying choose what you reveal, when, and to whom. That's the difference between being exposed and being respected, between being readable and being magnetic. Strategic honesty is simple, but most people overcomplicate it. It's about filtering information, not hiding it. It's about sharing what moves the situation forward instead of what makes you feel relieved. It's about giving access, but only when it's earned, needed, or effective. Let me break it down. First, share outcomes, not processes. People don't need to know the messy steps you took. They only care where you landed. Second, share confidence, not confusion. Nobody respects someone who over-explains their doubt in the middle of a decision. Third, share conclusions, not chaos. Your finished thought has weight. Your inner turmoil just creates openings. Think about it this way. Imagine two people in a meeting. One talks endlessly, explaining every hesitation, every worry, every second of doubt. The other speaks once clearly, decisively. Who holds more power in the room? Who do people actually remember? Who do they take seriously? The answer is obvious, and it's not the one who shares everything. Strategic honesty isn't about manipulation. It's about control. Control over how you're perceived, over the space you occupy, and over the influence you carry. It's about giving people just enough to understand you, respect you, and follow your lead, without giving away the blueprint of your mind. Here's the kicker. Once you master this, you start noticing a shift immediately. People start listening differently. They start projecting value onto the parts of you you reveal. They start engaging with curiosity, not entitlement. They start earning the truth instead of expecting it for free. So the next time you feel the urge to spill your thoughts, pause. Ask yourself, will this statement strengthen my position or weaken it? Because strategic honesty turns a conversation into influence, a room into your domain, and your presence into something that commands attention without shouting. And once you get this right, you'll never see honesty the same way again. Now let's get real about the rooms where honesty isn't just risky, it's dangerous. Not every environment rewards openness. Not every group, team, or social circle respects transparency. Some rooms operate quietly on competition, hierarchy, or hidden agendas. And if you walk in thinking honesty is a neutral value, you're already at a disadvantage. Take work environments, for example. Share too much about your doubts, your mistakes, or even your plans. And suddenly you're not just a team member. You're a reference point. You're predictable. You're exploitable. People notice what you reveal, and they adjust accordingly. Then there are competitive friendships. These aren't necessarily toxic people, but even subtle competition shifts the game. Overshare your insecurities, your desires, your strategies, and suddenly they know how to navigate around you, get ahead, or even manipulate situations in their favor. You think you're bonding, you're actually handing leverage. And new social hierarchies? Forget it. Every group has a pecking order. Honesty before trust is established is like showing your hand in poker before the first bet. The room will quietly catalog who you are, what you're comfortable revealing, and how to position themselves relative to you. Once that pattern is formed, it's hard to shift. Here's the harsh truth. If the room runs on status, even subtly, honesty becomes a currency you spend. Spend too freely, and suddenly you've lowered your own value. Share without strategy, and the room starts reading you like an open book. You might think you're building trust, but what you're really doing is giving access without earning it. The safest position? Observe, filter. Choose carefully what you share and when. Let the room earn the real you. That way, you control the narrative instead of letting it control you. Remember, some rooms don't deserve access to your full truth. Not because you're better, not because you're secretive, but because the environment isn't safe. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you stop giving away power that isn't yours to give. Pause and think. Does this room deserve everything I have to reveal? Or should I keep some of it for myself? Because once you see which rooms are safe and which aren't, you start protecting yourself while everyone else keeps exposing theirs. Now let's talk about something most people completely miss: the quiet advantage. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. It doesn't mean being uninterested. It doesn't mean being disengaged. In fact, in most rooms, the quiet person wields more invisible power than the one who speaks constantly. Here's why. When you don't reveal everything about yourself, people start to fill in the blanks. Our brains hate uncertainty, so we start projecting ideas, assumptions, even respect onto the parts of you we don't understand. That projection creates intrigue, and intrigue, in turn, creates authority. Think about it. Someone who talks too much gives away their entire operating system. You know how they think, what they fear, what they want. You can anticipate them. They're readable, predictable, manageable. Now compare that to the person who speaks selectively. One carefully chosen sentence carries weight. One insight lands like a punch. One pause draws attention. People lean in, wondering what's next. They want to understand, but they can't fully. And that keeps them engaged, curious, and yes, respectful. Here's the kicker. The quieter you are, the more mental space people give you. So next time you feel the urge to explain, justify, or overshare, ask yourself, am I adding weight to my presence, or am I diffusing it? Because the quiet person isn't just in the room, they own the room. And once you understand that, you'll never see silence the same way again. If this changed the way you think about honesty, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching.